Mine's got like all these like cool little things where I can like change like the colors to have like a big dance party in here if I wanted to. Tell me when to stop.
I like that one.
Okay.
Welcome to Life Manipulated, where we uncover the hidden biases that secretly shape our decisions. We are here to name the unknown and secret tactics that are already being used by companies and institutions towards the consumer.
And we hope that by making these biases more well known, we can create a community of bias hackers that are able to leverage these biases in their own benefit and design the lives that they want to live.
Awesome.
So let's get into it.
Yeah, I think we're going to do decision paralysis. Um,
Great.
and the general definition of decision paralysis is that when someone faces too many options, what behavioral scientists would call choice overload, they become paralyzed and unable to make a decision. And that's usually because they're scared of making the wrong choice, or they simply don't know where to begin on how to compare all of the options, or even how to start thinking about what decision that they want to make in that situation.
Yeah, so basically if there's a tough decision, you've got too many choices, you don't know what to do, you just avoid it and put it out of sight, out of mind kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel like the first thing that really comes to mind for me when I think about this is setting up your retirement contributions, because there's so many options about what an index fund and a mutual fund and ETF, and then there's like 500 different actual index funds and mutual funds and ETFs, and then you don't even know what they are, and no one's ever talked to you about this. It's like you go into your first job and they're like, you should set up retirement, but I think a lot of people just don't, because they have no idea what to decide. Did you experience
Yeah,
this at all?
no, honestly, yeah. And so my father ran a company for a while that was helping people to manage debt. And I remember vaguely back then reading some study, and I think it was on the concept of opt in versus opt out, which is
Mm.
similar. But what was happening is that they were finding, and this is probably why they implemented an opt in or an opt out program for people to be part of the company retirement plan, probably because of this choice overload thing. Because what they were finding is people had so many options. This is just what I'm remembering from it. They had so many options of things they didn't know what to pick, so they just wouldn't enroll in their company plan. And so what these guys decided to do is say, based on your age, we are going to automatically enroll you in this company match 401k program, and you have until this date to opt out. And if you opt
Mm.
out, then you're going to get all your money from your paycheck. If you do not opt out, then you're going. So it sounds like they were implementing two different behavioral psychology concepts, like this opt in versus opt out. But the main reason why they were doing that and seeing success is because when people were left to their own devices, they didn't know what to pick, like you were saying, and they would just do nothing, and nobody was enrolling in the programs.
Yeah, that's actually really amazing, because that's been, I think, become the status quo in the behavioral scientist community, when they advise companies who like want to increase the amount of individuals who open a retirement and actually contribute to it. Is
Mm-hmm.
I think the second behavioral science concept you were referencing was default bias, is that
Mm-hmm.
they default people into just having an open account. So your dad was really ahead of the curve with what he was doing. But I think I've also heard that frequently, like, this has helped with retirement account openings, but frequently there still needs to be a second step to help people actually choose an investment account, because oftentimes people don't, it's a set it and forget it program, it's a default program that you're defaulted into. And
Mm-hmm.
so you don't check it, and then 5 years later you realize all your money has just been sitting in a cash account. in in like Fidelity or Vanguard, and it hasn't been growing because it's not actually in the
Oof.
stock market. And I
Yeah.
think that I think and you're not actually allowed to advise people on like what to invest in, I think, as a company to their
Oh,
employees. So
okay.
you can't
Yeah.
really default people into that from what I
You
know.
can't do like a age optimized like general fund that you're all going to get opted into unless you. Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, unless rules have changed, compliance rules have changed. But yeah, that would be an easy thing to do because that's like
Yeah.
a pretty straightforward, um, yeah, pretty straightforward account.
Cool. So yeah, that's I guess that's one way that this choice like what is the cut what is the one we're talking about? I want to say choice overload, but that's not the real name of it. What's the it's decision
Decision
paralysis.
paralysis. Mm-hmm.
So that's one good example of why decision paralysis affects people. But so I guess there's some studies here that we're going to look at.
Yeah. So I have this study I pulled up by Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper. They did a couple studies in this one paper in 2000, and I'm going to talk about, I think, their first study. So, should we first? So, they did a randomized control trial. I think maybe we should give people an overview of what that is. Would you like to take a stab at it? I know you've,
Yeah, I'll try,
yeah,
and that'll be good because if I can get it, if I can still man it and nail what it is, then we're good.
yeah.
So basically, a randomized. So it's called a randomized controlled study,
Uh,
right?
I think it's normally a randomized controlled trial, but they
Trial.
mean the
Okay.
same thing just because
All
the
right.
acronym is RCT. It's a
So
mouthful.
basically, what I think this means is that there's certain like guardrails that are industry standards that they do for certain for studies to make sure that there's not biases coming into the results, and then by randomizing it, maybe even like the people involved don't know which section that they're going into or whatever, whether they're getting. I think I've heard of this in like medical terminology, like some people are getting a placebo and some people are not, and then like we're going to see which one actually had the effect. But I feel like it's something similar where like some people are getting one treatment, other people are getting another treatment, and then there's a control group that's getting no treatment, and seeing which one has some statistical significance, and so that we can say, is this really a bias, or is this really something that's affecting decisions, or is it, would people make this decision anyway without this intervention in place, I guess.
Yeah, I think you touched on all of the foundational aspects to it. So, and then some with placebos and so randomized controlled trials are the crux of it is and often very frequently used in medical studies. If you see a medical study that is not an RCT, it is likely not a robust study and you should not trust the results. So, RCTs, I'm just going to say RCT from here on out, is the crux of it is that
we're
essentially they
not we're not
take,
endorsing or debunking any vaccines by that statement. I'm
yeah,
just kidding.
we're not touching that topic at all.
I'm just kidding.
We're not even going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that makes
So,
sense.
a randomized controlled trial is a scientific experiment where you
Hmm.
randomly place individuals into different conditions. And a
Okay.
condition is essentially a grouping that receives one sort of intervention within this experiment. And one type of condition that most randomized controlled trials have are is a control condition, which is usually the condition that doesn't get any intervention at all. So
And
that
we
you
should
can,
probably define intervention too, because that's something
yeah,
that we're not talking about something you do with your friend that is on drugs.
that's like,
So
yeah, it's not that kind
it's
of
not that kind of an
intervention,
intervention.
but it is the same word. Yeah,
Yes.
so intervention could honestly honestly that is an intervention. like by definition, an intervention is just like changing something from the norm. But
Maybe that's why they call it that. So yeah,
yeah,
it's the thing that you're studying. It's like, okay,
right,
is this thing that we're trying to prove whether it exists or not? We're trying to like see if placing this into someone's life is going to change their behavior. So that thing we're placing in there is the intervention, and that's
right.
the behavioral psychology. So the intervention will be placed in one group, and then the other group will get a control, so they won't get that intervention. And then let's
Hmm.
see how their behavior changes.
Yeah, yeah, spot on. And I think it's very important that most studies have a control, because then if you say you have two different types of intervention, this is like a random example, but say you decide to put a a photo of a red circle on the wall in one office space and then a photo of a green circle on the wall in an office space, and you don't have a control, you have nothing to compare to. Like,
Yeah.
say these two do have effects and they have differences between each other, you don't know
Hmm.
how that compares to an office without a picture of a circle at
Got it.
all.
So the control wouldn't have the picture. It's like the
Hmm.
baseline.
Totally. Yeah, it's the counterfactual. It's if there was no intervention or intervening behavior or drug or um, stimulus, then what would people's behaviors be?
Cool. So now I can run my own studies. I didn't need to go to school now. I got
Yeah,
it.
perfect. What would be the first study you would run?
I'm not
How to
running any studies.
how to make the your neighbor's dog stop barking.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper ran a study in 2000 proving this concept of decision paralysis, and it was an RCT. So individuals were randomly assigned to either group A or group B. What they did was they found an upscale grocery store and they set up a tasting booth in both conditions. There was a tasting booth, but for one condition, in what they call the limited choice condition, they only had
Hmm.
6 jams in the tasting booth. And then in the other condition at the different upscale grocery store, they had 24 jams on this same tasting booth. So what they measured was customers' initial attraction to the booth, and then their subsequent purchasing behavior afterwards of jams was measured. What would be your guess on what happened with these outcomes?
Okay, so I think intuitively, before we started this, and not knowing anything about decision paralysis or choice overload, I would say the booth that had lots of jams, someone's going to find, a better jam that they're going to be more satisfied with. But understanding just what I do already, I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to end up finding that the one with limited choice is somehow better, is some in some way provides a better outcome to people.
Yeah, I feel like if I was going to a store, I would be, well, I know whenever I go shopping at like a super Target versus a corner store, I'm pretty displeased with the amount of choice I have at the corner store. Um, and so I feel like I would be more drawn to the booth with 24 jams and a lot of different flavors to try,
Hmm.
and potentially be happier with my experience there.
I actually have a counter example. Like for
Mm,
me, so I hate going into the store and there's just so much stuff. And I just like,
yeah.
there's like two things that I want. And like I have to walk through all these aisles with all these things that are like coming at me trying to get me to buy them, and it bothers me. So like I've recently started shopping with like the app. Have you ever
Mm,
done that yet? Like where you just pick out what you want and then you just show up outside and they just bring it out to you. You don't even
oh,
have to go in
yeah.
the store. It's actually been really good for me because I just like pick out the things that I want, put it in my cart, and then I show up. They bring it out to me. I tip them, and I can leave. And then the next time I go there, it's already kind of pre-selected the things that it knows that I kind of typically like. So I feel like I'm getting less choice, but I feel happier. And that's
Mm,
like the first time I've ever actually thought about that, because intuitively I would always think, yeah, I want more choices. But
mm.
so
I actually very much I've also feel you on that. Like it is just so overwhelming. I every time actually my partner and I go to the grocery store, the
mhm.
minute he steps in there, he just if we're having a conversation, he just freezes and stops talking and just like blank dead eyes and just is like so overwhelmed with everything in there. Um that it's like a deer in headlights. And I have frequently also felt the same way. And I think we've just like made a pact to never step foot in a grocery store without a list.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
of a similar tactic, but still needing to walk through the aisles on your own.
Interesting.
Um, but
Sorry, I
yeah,
derailed you. So we're
no,
at this
not at
study,
all.
and they've got the A and the B, and the A has
Six
limited choice.
jams. Mm-hmm.
Yep, 6 jams to choose from, and then the other one has a lot of jams.
Mm-hmm. And then the extensive choice with 24 jams. So, what they found is they measured the average number of flavors that participants sampled at each booth.
Okay.
And they found that there was no significant difference between the booths. That at both in both conditions, people sampled around 1.5 jam flavors, which I found
Okay.
surprising. I feel like I would be sampling way more at the 24
Yeah.
jam booth. I would be that annoying customer. But yeah, there was no huge
Interesting.
difference there. In the purchasing behavior, they found that in the limited choice condition with only 6 jams at the booth, that
Hmm.
only 30% of individuals purchased.
Okay.
And there was a significant difference between the two conditions. So then in the extensive choice with the 24 jams, only 3% of individuals actually purchased jam, which
No
is
way.
a massive difference.
That's bonkers.
And 3% is so low. If you were actually a small business trying to survive,
This would crush you.
yeah, this would like imagine this is one of those like very low lift, low cost changes that behavioral science often brings to companies. And it's like
Hmm.
the insight is, oh, what if you decided to sell 6 jams rather than 24 jams? And it sounds absolutely stupid. Like, why would I
Yeah.
do that? Why would I offer my customers less of an option? And also, why is in a solution that simple going to really move the needle on anything? But you really see it in this 30% versus
Yeah.
3% of
That's
purchases.
insane. You know what? And it does make sense. And a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing today, like other things like I took this course on like these click funnel systems for marketing, where it's
Mm,
like they say you can't have a website where it's just super busy and there's all this stuff all over the website, because your customer gets distracted. They don't know where they're supposed to go. And then they just like start clicking on things, and then they lose track of it, and then they never end up actually purchasing the thing that you want them to purchase. And so this concept is have one call to action, like one place
mm-hmm.
that they're driven to on that website, with a specific customer in mind that you're driving there. They're going to click on that, they're going to do the one action, and they're going to be more happy going through. So it's like we're seeing, and like in this example, I mean, can you imagine, like it's kind of, this store is like, oh, we're going to get all these jams, and they put it all out on the place. And then if they'd just taken just enough shelf space for 6 jams, they could have sold more. It would have been less effort, taken up less space, and they would have done better in profit. So it's just, that's fascinating to me, how big of a difference
Yeah.
just like this little tweak that isn't intuitive can make.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like something that this insight of only having one call to action and one funnel and one path that consumers go through being more
Mm-hmm.
effective. I think that insight is also like touches on the overall concept in behavioral science that we are all very busy people and we all have very limited attention spans. And I think this feeling of overwhelm when we walk into a grocery store is because
Yep.
we're all of a sudden getting hit with all of like all of the billions of dollars of marketing on packaging and like there's behavioral science grocery store design even on the layout and like the placement of things, and we're just being completely overwhelmed, like everything is trying to grab our attention. And I think that leads to a lot of overload and a lot of stress. And
Yeah.
I also think this is why Apple is such a successful and popular product.
Because they've just made it so simple, and
Mhm.
they've made, yeah, that it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, compared to Windows, it's especially with phones, like iPhones compared to Androids, you just have like way less autonomy on settings that you can set within the
Hmm.
phone. And they usually present options as like very simplified, like you just actually have these three options. I find it infuriating on a phone, which is why
Yeah.
I am an Android person, but
Okay.
surprisingly have a Mac because it is, yeah, for different reasons. But I think Apple's
Interesting.
done a really good job simplifying choice
So yeah,
environments.
I mean, we've got businesses, governments, they're overtly using these same biases. They're trying to leverage them in their favor to like get us to buy the things that they want us to buy, or believe the things that we want, that they want us to believe. And so that feeling of bombardment when you walk into the store, you're getting all those messages all at once. So I guess the other thing that we want to do here, unless, is there more on the study, or should we brainstorm some ways we can use this
So I do want to
for our own
mention
good?
one other study just
Okay,
because it kind of shows insight to some things we've talked about, and I don't know, it's
let's hear it.
interesting and surprising.
Okay,
So this is the third study that the same researchers did,
okay,
and what they did here was that they had three conditions in this study. They had a control condition, which we know is when they don't have intervention at all.
yeah,
So this general study was they randomly divided participants into three conditions and they asked them to choose a type of chocolate to try. And then they
okay,
asked them to rate themselves on a couple measurements on how they felt throughout the process. So, their limited choice condition, they gave participants six chocolates to try. And then their extensive choice condition, they gave participants 30 chocolates to try.
okay.
And then in the control condition, they just gave the participants a piece of chocolate to eat, which I think is hilarious. But that was the start. You come in, you eat a piece of chocolate, thanks, bye.
They're probably like, "What the heck? I eat a
Yeah.
chocolate?" And then they tell us to leave. These
Yeah. I
crazy
mean, where can I
psychologists.
sign up for these? um, let's see what the results said. So this one's unsurprising, but people in the extensive choice condition where they had 30 chocolates to choose between, they spent
Hmm.
significantly more time deciding which chocolate to choose.
Okay,
Makes sense.
yeah. So it's a time suck, I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah, way more things to compare, way more things to actually compare between. And then they also measured how informed participants felt in in all conditions.
Okay.
Um, and
Can
there
you
was,
imagine that one on the chocolate one? They're like, I guess I'm informed.
yeah, no
Just one
idea.
chocolate.
Informed about what? How
Okay,
to eat
yeah.
chocolate? um, but yeah, they found no differences on how informed people felt in making their decisions in any
Interesting.
of the conditions. So whether you have six chocolates or 30 chocolates in front of you, you generally feel like you have the ability to choose the right one for yourself.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So we tend to think a lot in life that like if we give the consumer more options, they're going to be more satisfied. And I think to a point that's true. I mean, you got to give them enough options, maybe that they feel like they have something to choose from. but
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily a good thing. It's not like they're gonna. I think in sales, a lot of salespeople do this. They like think, "Oh, I'm gonna make my client just feel so good and like so informed. I'm gonna tell them everything, and I'm gonna give them all these options, and then they're gonna feel so informed, and they're gonna love me." And what a good salesman will tell you is, no, people want to be told what to do. They want to like have someone that they trust. As long as there's trust there and they, okay, you got my right interest in mind, I trust you, what do I want to pick here? What is my best option? They don't want that. And so this kind of tells us like, hey, you've got six choices. Here's, the ones that I think are best for you, versus here's 30 choices. It's just going to draw out the process and make it longer and not make them feel more informed.
Yeah, we often think that more information is better, just like you just mentioned, and it's not for a lot of
Yeah.
people, for most people. And
Yeah.
I always point to exercise fitness watches and apps when I'm trying to make
Okay.
this point, because
Oh yeah.
I've got a Garmin, it measures my heart rate, my SpO2, I think is one thing, my
Hmm.
pulse ox, which I think those are actually like flip sides of each, but I have no idea. My sleep, it gives me so much data on so many things. How often do I look at this? And also, even if I look at this information every day, even after a workout, I'm like curious about essentially one thing, my average heart rate, or like how long I spent in the aerobic section of
Yeah.
heart range. But if I actually had to take in all of this information that's being tracked about me and make a decision on something, I would have no idea where to begin. And also, the minute I look at it, I forget it. It's like a
do,
blip.
do you know where I thought you were going with that? I thought you were going to talk about Dan's his
His scale.
scale that he made. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a fascinating story to me. It's like this scale that doesn't tell you your weight, that just tells you
Yeah.
your trend, which way you're trending. And I think that's very similar to this. It's just when people get on a scale and they've just worked out and they're like so excited and they go get on the scale and they weigh 2 more pounds than they did yesterday, and they're mad because they're like, what the heck? But I mean, our normal body weight fluctuates anyway. So maybe you just caught it at a time where it was naturally higher. So the idea that it's, instead of telling you your weight every time you get on it, it's going to tell you which way you're trending, is giving
Mm-hmm.
you less information, but it makes you happier, because
Yeah.
that's really what you care about. Is this working?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Am I going down? Am I going up? What's happening? So
I
that,
think
yeah.
honestly, I think people need this for the stock market as well. because
Yes.
because I think the stock market works in the same way that your body weight does, where if you look at it on a graph and you are generally day to day, it will go up and
Hmm.
down. Like if you zoom in, it will look like very confusing. You won't know what to do with the data points. But if you zoom out, the stock market is doing this,
Hmm.
generally going
Yeah.
up. And hopefully if your goal is to lose weight, what will happen is it will go downwards, but in like a wavy
Yeah.
sort of way. So yeah, Dan's scale,
Yeah.
I think, helped a lot of people in like not stressing over the number and just either getting a positive reinforcement of like green light, or I can't actually remember what exactly the reinforcement was. But I think if you're generally trending the right way, it gives you a green light. If you're not,
Yeah.
it
It's
gives you,
something positive and lets you know it's giving you less information.
yeah, yeah. I wish those were still on the market. I would get one.
Yeah. Me too. I
um,
actually really would.
yeah,
So
maybe we can shoot him an email and ask him if he has
let's get a
any
Kickstarter
in the
going.
back warehouse. Yeah.
Hey
um,
everyone, go to lifemanipulated.com and then the scale. No.
you can buy this vintage scale that's no longer manufactured. Um, but I think you really touched on this final finding from this study, which was they found that individuals in the extensive choice condition that had 30
Hmm.
chocolates to choose from, they found it, as we could imagine, more difficult and frustrating than the individuals in the limited choice condition who only had six chocolates to choose from.
Hmm.
Um, but surprisingly, they found it significantly more enjoyable, which makes it feel
Interesting.
like we don't know what's good for ourselves.
Hmm.
And we go through this, like we were talking about with grocery stores and many other situations in life, like we want all of the information and all of the options possible so that we can make the best decisions for ourselves. But oftentimes we end up throwing our hands up and not making a decision, or we get overloaded by choice. But surprisingly, we enjoy that frustration and difficulty. um, we enjoy that process more.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, so that sounds to me a little bit of conflicting feedback here then,
Yeah.
because in the jam study, more people bought when they had less options. But in this
Mm-hmm.
study, people were more satisfied with their ultimate choice. Hmm.
Or
So there's
they,
some,
no, sorry, just to clarify,
okay. Yeah.
both conditions were equally satisfied with their choice, felt
Oh, okay.
equally informed about their ability to make the right choice.
Okay.
But for the extensive choice, they found the process more difficult and more frustrating, but they enjoyed the process more.
Gotcha. So maybe this is like if it's something that you really care about or it's something that's fun, like, and you want to go through a long process and it's enjoyable for you, that's fine. Just know that it's not going to necessarily increase your overall satisfaction
Yeah.
later with your choice by going through that process. So, like, if you really love cars, maybe you'll go through this difficult, long process of figuring out the exact right car for yourself. But then at the end of the day, like, it's not going to bring you much more happiness of getting the car you end up choosing than if you only had six options to choose from, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a very very good insight, and it's almost telling us, like, it almost sounds like it's saying, like, if you are really into cars, enjoy the journey and not the end goal of like
Yeah.
finding the right car, but you'll enjoy the process of like going to shows and looking under the hood and looking. I don't know anything about cars,
No,
as you
that,
can
yeah, that
tell,
makes
but
sense though. Yeah, and that
um
actually correlates a lot with Elizabeth Dunn's research on the links between happiness and money, where it's like if it's an experience for you, then that's going to bring you more happiness than just,
mm,
buying an actual product.
mm,
So, yeah,
yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah, I think, and in this study as well, they found that both limited choice and extensive choice conditions rated higher satisfaction than the control condition that was just given a piece of chocolate. Like, if you weren't able to make a choice on what car you buy and you were just given one. I mean, well, I
Hmm.
would be pretty happy if someone gave me a car for free,
Yeah,
but
that's true. We're gonna need Mr. Beast to like gift us a car or something.
yeah, and then
Um,
rate how we feel.
yeah. Um, okay, so one of my favorite things that we're going to be doing in this is that we can like take this what we've just learned and we can figure out a cool way that we can apply it to our own lives to leverage it in our favor because we're always being bombarded by people using these biases against us to try to like get us to buy the things they want and believe the things they want to believe. But like, I'm curious, like, if we can brainstorm some ways just quickly how we might be able to do this. And I also want to open it up to anyone listening if they can, make comments or on our website, like, hey, here's how I would use this in my favor. Because I think that's the whole idea behind the bias hacker movement that we're trying to create is this idea that we can understand these principles and then use them in our own life for our own good, kind of like we're manipulating ourselves to have the outcomes that we want. So one idea that I had as I was kind of thinking through this is like if there's something that's super complicated and I have like too many choices, I could maybe try to dumb the choice down into categories. So it's like using the jam as an example. Like I had imagined that all these choices of jams, there was like one that was like strawberry based, but it was like strawberry mint or strawberry this or strawberry that. And then, but then you could say, okay, well, am I more in the mood for strawberry, raspberry, grape, or whatever else, right? So just try to narrow it down into categories and then make your choice based on the broad category rather than getting caught up in the details, if that makes sense. So that was one idea that you could use this if you're feeling decision paralysis to try to like segment things into broad categories and make a decision off that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to do it. And actually, usually we don't have a study when we talk about applications or how to leverage this bias in our own lives, because we're really
Mm-hmm.
interested in how people are testing what works for them in their own life. But
Mm-hmm.
surprisingly, for this first episode, we do, which is
Okay.
um, a study by Johnson and a couple other researchers ran a study in 2012, and they
Okay.
found that exactly like you said, something that is actually researched and backed by data is that a way to combat decision paralysis is by simplifying your choice attributes or the number of available options. So, what they mean when they say simplifying choice attributes, this can be accomplished. Usually, you would see this as a table comparing different attributes of often various subscription services or various tiers of the same service. Um, I think we can link an example of something in the show notes, but usually you'll see a basic plan that offers 4 attributes in a table and with maybe gray check marks. And then you'll see a premium plan with those same 4 attributes and then 2 more with like a very exciting green colored check mark next to the 2 extra ones, and et cetera, et
Mm,
cetera, which makes you feel like, oh, this premium plan is obviously providing me way more than this boring grayed out basic plan, and kind of draws you to want to sign up for the premium plan versus the basic plan. And there's actually even more complex behavioral science in designing choice architecture that we'll get into in a different episode. But they did find that simplifying the decision making context help people be able to make decisions and feel less frustrated, and where to even begin on comparing these two different plans or comparing these two different options. And what they're doing is they're really just taking the cognitive load of having to create that table in your own head off of the consumer's shoulders, and they're
gotcha.
showing them the actual value that's being added with the premium plan in a very clearly laid out visual.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm excited for the choice architecture episode because that's another one where it's very similar to this, and it's there's some really fascinating science around choice architecture and how people can get nudged into buying this one, and then if some of the choices are taken out, then now they want to go towards another one. And so there's some really interesting ways that we're manipulated in that way, and like so I'm
Yeah.
excited for that episode to see like how we can understand that better and how we can leverage it in our own lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love choice architecture and I can nerd out about it. So equally as excited.
Cool. Hopefully that's one of the
um,
next few episodes. So,
yeah. Yeah. I think maybe an unconventional take, but a way that I feel like I leverage, maybe leverage is not the right word, the way that I embrace decision paralysis is
hmm
that if I am deciding between a lot of options of, let's go with the newest kitchen gadget that I want that I think will make my life significantly easier. Um, and there's a bunch of various kitchen gadgets or a bunch of different types of one that I'm really trying to decide between. And I just I feel like I'm just in a tumultuous state for the next like however long I keep those items in my cart because I just can't decide on which one to choose, and I'm not going to get all of them because that would be too ridiculous.
okay.
Um, and I realize that what I'm facing is decision paralysis, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to embrace this and delete everything and throw my hands up and say, I'm not making a decision because maybe I don't need this thing that I've lived many happy years without. and realize that more is not always better. And I don't know. Sometimes I think,
That's really cool.
yeah, in a
Yeah.
consumerist, like very in a world where we're like often having our attention, we're like bombarded with ads on Instagram or whatever social media you use, or even walking into a grocery store. Um, Sometimes it feels nice to really embrace it and be like, wow, so glad I don't have to make a decision on that thing, because
Yeah.
that would take a lot of cognitive effort to parse through which one would be best.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, I do not resonate with the cart thing. That's not
Yeah.
something I've experienced.
It's fine.
But the thing is like I do resonate with the idea that sometimes when you understand, oh, this is what's actually happening to me right now,
Hmm.
that just that understanding allows you to kind of look at it from a different angle and be okay to just like let go of it. Like it's like you're stepping outside of Plato's cave or something. Like you were in Plato's cave
Yeah.
only experiencing it from one angle, and then once you realize this is what's happening to me, I'm going through decision paralysis, I can just let go of this thing. And maybe later, if it's really still bothering me and there's one that's sticking out to me above the others, then that's the one I'll go with. But for now, I can just embrace the chaos and by throwing it away and letting it just maybe come back into my life later. That's really, that I really empathize with. And I think that that makes sense. And I do want to let people in the audience, if you're hearing this and you're like thinking of something like, oh, they should be saying this because this is the best way to leverage this bias that I've done in my life or I'm thinking of. We want to know those things. If you can go to www.lifemanipulated.com and join our list, our email list to become part of our community and share these ideas because we want to know what you guys are thinking about that. And for some reason, I don't know why, and we're going to fix this. If you go to lifemanipulated.com, it does not work. I don't, it's weird and I'm going to fix it. But right now, you have to put in www.lifemanipulated.com. If you put that in, it should work. So, but yeah, we want to hear other ways. And then maybe on a future episode, we can say, hey, here's some really good ideas that we heard about how you can leverage decision paralysis in your life. And we'll give you a shout out. And we hope that as a community, we can kind of come up with some great ideas on how to design our lives with these things in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I love reading research and I'm all for robust study designs and RCTs, but I think something that is magical about learning about a behavioral science concept and being able to kind of test it in your own life, or kind of recognize that it's a process that's going on in your brain, and kind of being able to tweak and design your own life in ways that work for you, is a really amazing thing that we would love to hear about. And it can be different for everyone because we all live such different lives in how we apply these different concepts.
Yeah, there's no wrong answers, and we want to hear from you guys. So that's awesome. What are we going to talk about on the next episode? Do you have an idea yet?
I think we are going to do default bias.
Oh, I love default bias.
Yeah, it's your favorite
Yes,
bias, right?
it is
You've
my
told me
favorite.
this,
I
which is
love
very awesomely nerdy to have a favorite bias.
it. Yes. Yeah. So, okay, cool. Let's do that one next. And then I guess we have some calls to action here at the end. If you liked this, share it with a friend. Share, like, get them to, because there's people out here who don't understand these things. And if we can all kind of create a community together and be understanding these things, we can make each other's lives better. Go to www.lifemanipulated.com, join the Bias Hacker community. You get the monthly newsletter and you can interact with other bias hackers as we learn as a community how to leverage these biases and to design our lives the way we want to live.
Awesome.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank y'all for tuning in.